Good morning. I'm Dr. Barry. I'm a licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. Right now, the Ashley Benefield sentencing is also happening right now. I listened to a little bit of the testimony from a psychologist, I believe, an expert in DV that was called by the defense, and so that is all happening in the background. We will see if I have time to get to a little bit of that towards the end. Today, I wanted to take a look at Sarah Boone's sentencing. Sarah Boone was charged and convicted of second degree capital M in the death of her boyfriend, George Torres. The testimony in this case was so bad, and there were witnesses for her during the sentencing that tried to talk about how, oh no, she's not narcissistic. Like she does all of these nice things for me, that said all of these things. And then Sarah got on the stand and gave her statement. I did watch James Owens, I did watch his interview with the press after. I did see Jules. Jules, I think, was able to ask him a question, and I saw her on camera for a moment. We all sat back and looked at this case and just saw Sarah should have taken the plea deal. The plea deal the state offered her was a good deal. And honestly, if she hadn't taken self-defense, battered spouse syndrome, intimate partner violence, if she hadn't taken that perspective, the most damaging evidence for her case would have never come into the trial. And once again, I do think she lacks insight. I think she watches the videos and we see her tormenting George, and she looks at that same video and she sees can't y'all like she sees herself as the victim. And that is what will happen with individuals with narcissistic traits or with there are times when people can put up these defenses. And every time I cover this case, I like to talk about non-bizarre delusions versus bizarre delusions. And a non-bizarre delusion is this inaccurate belief, this inaccurate perception. But for Sarah, I don't even think a lot of the psychologists would even say that she's delusional. What they said is that she has these narcissistic traits. She puffs herself up, and it is oh so troubling. I do have some thoughts on why I think Judge Kranek, his sentencing was so short. So short. And um and I think a part of that was when people feel that they've been victimized by the justice system, if the judge goes in and like gives this speech and this spiel and breaks down exactly why they're giving the sentence that they're giving on appeal, that could show some bias because let's say they want to say, oh, judge, you this or that, or they can kind of play with it a little bit more. Judge Kranek, he was short and sweet to the point, and he just gave his thing. A lot of you all have watched this. I watched Emily D. Baker's coverage. I watched Tanika's 2 cents coverage. I haven't been able to watch The Lawyer You Know. I know he covered it. I did watch Dr. G Explains, went over her body language. And so I was able to watch that as well before things started because they were waiting for a while. And so I think Owens right here is going through her statement with her. So Sarah wrote a long statement, and I'm just going to mute this and we are going to play. And I think Owens went through and took out things because when she stands up to give her statement, she's going to say this is the edited version, and I think she's a little frustrated with the fact that parts of this is are gonna be edited, and because to me, he seems stern in this moment with her, not in a bad way, but, like, in a, "Sarah, listen to me, this isn't good for you. Like, no, like, this we need to take this out, this part is not gonna be helpful," and so this is what I don't know exactly what's happening in this moment. I would suspect that he's going through her written statement and he's helping her edit out and tweak some things. Um, the impacts I do wanna play because, they talk about, Judge Cranick covers the, um 'cause the state entered and I haven't seen whoopsie, I cov so that's the my orange clerk. Sorry about that. I wanted to see if the documents were available, because I did not see the state's response to, the request for a new trial. Alright, so this is I'm trying to find the civil one. They might have did they take it down? It's okay. It's probably in another section. Um, I wanted to see if I could find because I was interested to hear what the state had to say related to her request for a new trial. I was pretty sure it was gonna be denied, and it was, but let's watch Judge K go over this part real quick. She's gonna have to say her name for the record. He's gonna apologize for running a little bit behind, and, um, they are going to go over this matter about, her requesting a new trial.
To address the defendant's motion for new trial and the state's response to the defendant's motion for new trial. Anything in addition you'd like to argue at this time, Mr. Owens, over and above what is contained in your motion, sir?
No, sir.
State.
No, sir.
All right. After reviewing the motion and the state's response the same, the defendant's motion for a new trial is denied based on the court's review of the record, the court's participation in the trial, and the review of all the evidence of the court's prior findings and rulings at trial and prior thereto. With that, I believe that we're prepared to proceed with sentencing at this time. The court has reviewed the pre-sentencing investigation prepared by the Department of Corrections. Are there any housekeeping matters that we need to address, Mr. J or Mr. Cacciatore?
And let me try to see real quick if I can, because I was not able to cover or see. Let me click. I am not a robot. Okay. Okay. Criminal. All right. Let me see if I can. Yeah, the psychiatric evaluation is closed. This was a motion for downward departure. We don't need to see that. State's response to defendant's motion. Yes. Okay. So let's take a look at this right here because I have not seen this yet. State's response to defendant's motion for a new trial. I'm guessing that, it's 13 pages. So we might skip around a little bit. Ground one, the court ruling defendant not entitled to court appointed counsel. This ground is based on things that occurred well before the trial began and does not appear to be a basis for the court to grant a motion for a new trial under Florida Rule of Criminal Procedure. And I love it when they cite the law. The court's decision on this ground is well supported by the facts and law outlined in the court's 16-page order dated June 28th, 2024, which we went over that. Judge Cranick did a phenomenal job going back through the record because Judge Cranick was the second judge. Judge Wooten was the one that had the case for, I want to say it was about 3 years. Judge Wooten was the one that had it for the longest. And I think about 6 of the attorneys was when Judge Wooten had the case. And then Judge Cranick came on and he has maintained a phenomenal record. Um, and then ground two, court denying defendant's motion to continue. This ground is based on things. Oh, sorry. Okay, wait a minute. Is that, oh, the same? This is based on things that happened before everything started. The defendant is overstating the holdings of cases she cited. The court shall not deprive a defendant of his or her right to counsel of their own choice. Failure of the court to grant a continuance will result in a new trial should the court deny said motion for a continuance by new counsel is not the holding of these cases. Oh wow. So they're saying you got the law wrong. So that right there. Point number 5 is y'all are not citing this law correct. A defendant's right to counsel of his or her choice is not absolute, which I think is exactly what Judge Kranek said in his order. And a court's consideration of any continuance should balance the defendant's right with consideration of the impact of the administration of justice. And that's exactly what Judge Kranek put in his initial order. Any denial of a continuance to obtain new counsel must be based on an adequate inquiry into the circumstances with findings to ensure the defendant's constitutional rights were not being deprived. And before James Owens, Sarah's primary lawyer, before he agreed to take the case, there was all he had to do was click on the public information, see Judge Kranek's order, but I think he thought there's no way the judge would deny, like, if a new lawyer did come on, even though in Judge Kranek's order it says, "For no reason am I gonna grant a continuance." And let's not forget that the hurricane gave her a few extra days, okay? Like, she got an extra week because of the hurricane, like, and so this is but I still wanna go through it. The court's 16-page order dated June 28th, 2024 adequately addresses the circumstances of the defendant's forfeiture of her right to counsel and the setting of a trial certain date of October 7th. And they got an extra week because of everything. The court did not abuse its discretion by denying a continuance in this matter. The case was over 4.5 years old because of the defendant's issues with multiple prior attorneys, issues created by her behavior. The underlying work of the defense of self-defense wait a minute, the underlying work of the defense of self-defense and battered spouse evidence to be used in support of a claim of self-defense had been done by prior counsel. So I think the the state is trying to say, like, hey, it's not like they pulled this out of nowhere and they had never had a an expert come in to evaluate her, because they pretty much they used the exact same expert that evaluated her back in 2020. Like, I think that was the first time Dr. Harper met with Sarah. Much of the records disclosed to the state in October 2024 had been acquired years ago by prior counsel via subpoena and provided to private investigator Billy Lane. And so the Florida Supreme Court requires only 30 days notice prior to trial for a defendant to rely upon battered spouse syndrome evidence. In this circumstance, with the expert already working on the defense's case for years, it's like Dr. Harper had been on the case, had already put in so many hours, and relying upon the records the defendant had in her possession for years, it was the state that only had 30 days to handle this evidence, which is true. The state was the one that was at a disadvantage trying to find an expert to evaluate her, because I think the expert they preferred wasn't available. And that's how they ended up going with Dr. Warner, which Dr. Warner did fine, but the state was the one that was actually at a disadvantage. After prior counsel had indicated it would not be filing a notice of intent to rely on battered spouse syndrome evidence. And I think they probably denied it in the past because they realized, number one, Sarah didn't talk about being in fear for her life. Like, that's where, because even in her statement, she doesn't once mention alcohol, and I think because everybody that spoke on Sarah Boone's behalf met her once she was sober. Not a single person spoke publicly in court on Sarah's behalf that knew her prior to prior to this incident. Everybody that spoke publicly, they all met her in jail or within the last few years. Those are the people that spoke on her behalf and talked about what an awesome person she was and how like that. Those were the people that made those statements. And I have some thoughts on that, and I'm gonna get to that a little bit later. And with this case and with everything that came forward, I personally thought her trying to say, "I was drunk, I passed out," like, it wasn't because second-degree murder requires depraved heart. And to me, what showed depraved heart was all of those videos that the state presented on rebuttal. When the defense finished its case, I was a little concerned that Sarah was just gonna get manslaughter or that the jury might have believed everything. I had no clue the evidence the state had that just and Marianne, so we're gonna get to her rant very soon. All right. Uh While it did take time to review the entirety of the defendant's phone extraction, the state was able to do so in the same time frame and narrow it down to 167 pages of PDF and 213 videos and photos. The phone extraction had been provided years ago to the defendant's prior counsel. It was again provided to the defendant while she was pro se. The 911 calls and body worn camera footage from the prior incidents took approximately a day and a half to review, and it was accomplished after it was learned on, October 1st, 2024, during her deposition that Dr. Harper relied on them. Wow. So I think that's how that evidence came in, that Dr. Harper had reviewed body cam footage. Wow, these were provided to the defense on October 4th, 2024. There was an entire week of no action taken by the court between October 7th and October 14th, 2024 because of Hurricane Milton. So she kind of got her continuance without getting her continuance. She kinda did. She kinda got her continuance without actually having to get her continuance. That and the prior 5 weeks was more than sufficient for a team of 4 attorneys and a trial consultant to review the material if the undersigned could. I love the shade. I love the shade. It's like, if we could review it in this period of time, and I think it was just those 2 primary attorneys on the state side, they had 4 attorneys and a trial consultant. Why didn't y'all review it? And they're not even saying this, because in my mind, I'd be thinking, and yet you had time to write up motions about hair and makeup. You had time to make arguments about snacks. Now, granted, Sarah was the one asking for all those things, but still. Okay. Ground 3, survivor outburst during presentation of evidence. This is Oh. During the publishing of the exhibit, which contained this video, apparently a single family member of the homicide survivor had an emotional reaction and left the courtroom. The undersigned's back was turned and did not witness this. Yes, the family member did not return for the duration of the evidence presentation. It cannot be said that this nonverbal single emotional outburst was so prejudicial to vacate to vitiate the entire trial, to get rid of the entire trial. The court's findings on this situation are subject to an abuse of discretion standard, and the court did not abuse its discretion. I agree. Like, and the undersigned's recollection is at sidebar, there was no request for curative instruction, but rather a request to excuse the jury. The jury was excused, and the member of the victim's family had either excused herself or then excused herself. The allegation was made that this was intentionally staged by the state. Yeah, right. I don't like that. So that's where, uh, oh, and so that's why I like talking about this case, because the state is reminding everyone. I know the defense is trying to make Sarah to be the victim. George is the one that lost his life. Like, George is the actual his family, they are the ones that are the victims here, and so the state says it was neither intentional nor is it uncommon that a homicide survivor who has a right to be in the courtroom pursuant to that law was mistaken in their belief about his or her ability to not become emotional during trial. Like, this happens. This really does happen. Um, Oy. And so they give some additional law. So in this case, so here, Neberg versus state. There, the victim deliberately testified about DNA evidence on her buttocks belonging to the defendant, when in fact it was not the conclusion of the DNA and analyst, whose findings were inconclusive. Okay, so so I guess a victim stated something that was not true during their testimony or something. Okay. And so they go through some other law of why that's wrong. Ground floor, Dr. Werner's testimony. If you are new to my if you're new to my channel, I covered Dr. Werner's deposition because I wanted to see it. Owens posted the entire deposition, and so I wanted to take a look at it. Um, all right. So we're on number 17. The state understands the court's ruling at trial on the matter of whether Dr. Warner's opinion about the inapplicability of battered spouse syndrome evidence was a concept, as a concept, was a discovery violation, and is not revisiting it for that purpose. Rather, the defendant has included this in her motion for a new trial, so the state will readdress it. Like, so this whole sentence says, I thought we addressed this in trial, but since you're bringing it up again, okay. The state is not required to disclose unrecorded oral statements unless it materially alerts a prior written or recorded statement previously provided by the state to the defendant. Okay. The state deposed the defendant's expert, Dr. Julie Harper, as soon as possible after she was disclosed. This deposition occurred October 1st, 2024. The very next day, Dr. Werner evaluated the defendant at Orange County Jail at noon on October 2nd, given that trial was set October 4th. It was less than This was less than ideal for the state. The state was not provided the materials that Dr. Harper had relied on at that time during the defendant. Oh, uh, so the state was not provided the materials that Dr. Harper had relied on at that time, although the defendant acquired much of them years earlier. Dr. Harper's deposition had not been transcribed yet for Dr. Warner's review prior to the evaluation. The second defense expert, Dr. Michael Brannon, had not been deposed yet. So they're just going through why, like, all of this happened. After the defendant, in most material aspects, repeated her statements she made to Dr. Julie Harper that she zipped the victim in the suitcase and they both initially thought it was funny, but she became angry after the victim stated he could not breathe, so she became aggressive with the victim and ultimately left him there despite his stating he could not breathe and demonstrating his inability to get himself out of this predicament. It was Dr. Warner's conclusion that battered spouse syndrome evidence would not would oh, that BSS evidence would be inapplicable. Okay. Immediately after that evaluation on October 2nd, both parties and the defendant went to court to argue the defendant's motion to suppress. On October 3rd, okay, the state began reviewing the prior interactions with law enforcement that Dr. Harper said she had relied upon during her deposition on October 1st. Wow. Okay. Y'all, so this is why it's good to go through some of this stuff. So what ended up happening was the defense gave Dr. Harper things that the state hadn't seen yet. So the state hadn't even seen some of the things that Dr. Harper used, but the state looked at that evidence and saw it through a different lens. So the state looked at it and they saw, wait a minute, like this is showing she's the aggressor. Like she's a problem. And yet the defense expert looked at it and saw, oh, like she's traumatized and she's this and she's that. I don't see that. In my opinion, just my personal thoughts, I did not evaluate Sarah. I just saw the trial and saw all this information. It seemed like she tormented him completely. Okay. All right. All right. So, and arrange for body worn camera and 911 calls to be provided to the defense team by Dave Cacciatore on October 4th, while the undersigned was in that county handling a placement hearing on a not guilty by reason of insanity case. Okay. Later on October 3rd, the undersigned took the deposition of the second battered spouse syndrome expert, Dr. Michael Brannon. On October 4th, immediately after concluding the insanity placement hearing in the morning, the defense team took the deposition of Dr. Warner. Mr. Owens pressed Dr. Warner for any other opinions she may have, and Dr. Warner insisted on being asked specific questions. This is not a discovery violation nor the creation of a prior inconsistent statement. The victim's failure to mention the two incidents in response to defense counsel's open ended deposition questions did not amount to a material change in testimony from the videotaped interview with Martin, Detective Martin's report, or the victim's deposition. Maybe I don't know. Because the victim, I guess this was one of the prior incidents that had happened before. Because the victim's unrecorded statement did not materially change her previous testimony, the trial court ended that inquiry and properly concluded the state was not required to produce the statement. Okay. So there was some other things that happened. Y'all know I'm not a lawyer. I'm a psychologist that likes to read about this stuff. Oh my gosh, such big words. Furthermore, the defendant was repeatedly placed on notice that the state did not believe, as a matter of law, that her statements, taken in light most favorable to her, amounted to self-defense under Florida law. It just didn't. It just didn't. It just and we all saw that. Like, who in fear for their life goes upstairs and goes to bed? And she even said, "I thought he could get out." Like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. A discussion was held immediately following Dr. Warner's evaluation between the state and defendant's lead counsel to this effect, when defendant's lead counsel expressed that he believed the state should be lowering its offer of 15 years in the Department of Corrections because of what we had all just witnessed the defendant say. Whoa. The state viewed the evaluation very differently and let the defendant's lead counsel know why. Further litigation ensued, so I guess they just argued. Immediately thereafter, the defense's motion to suppress statements. So they must have been trying to suppress, I think the motion I remember to suppress was, some of the statements um, from the her second interview. And because the detective did make some statements that, like, it was still like that saying not intentional doesn't mean that she's not responsible, like, so those statements were suppressed. The defendant in her motion states the witness had formed a new opinion relating to whether the defendant perceived an imminent threat at the time of the offense. This issue was discussed extensively in the expert's witness deposition taken on October 4th. Sure. The word imminent does not appear in the entire 87-page deposition. It was not discussed. What the defendant stated on page and not Judge Kranek loves when you give him a page number. Like, give him a page number and tell him where to look. Cuz Owens was like, "Look at this deposition. You'll see I'm right." No, like, I'm not going to read 87 pages. Like, just tell me where I should look. And Owens never did it. Because to me, Owens was upset by the end of this trial. I think he saw he was losing. I don't think, and no lawyer wants to lose, but just my personal thoughts, he didn't. And I think he was passionate. I think he really does believe, or like, that Sarah was a victim. I don't know. It's hard because based on some of his interviews and things, I just can't. Okay. What the defendant stated on page 78 of Dr. Warner's deposition, according to Dr. Warner, was, and I saw, and she said, I saw him in the suitcase and I zipped him up and we were laughing. And then he said he couldn't breathe. And I remember feeling I couldn't breathe when he was, oh, those words. And I got angry and I shook the suitcase. I lost control of the suitcase and it flipped. Which, because her story changed, and because she didn't say she lost control during her testimony, but it is what it is. Because she was never questioned on that opinion, and there were no inconsistent statements to impeach Dr. Warner with. Hypothetically, if the defendant had gotten Dr. Warner's opinion on the matter during the deposition, the state fails to see what the defendant could really do about it other than disagree with it because Dr. Warner's opinion did not violate this law. I love the way these are written. That's why I like to take a look at these. It was not an opinion on whether the defendant was guilty or not guilty. It was an opinion about whether the defendant used a justifiable use of deadly or non-deadly force, and she didn't. The opinion was about the applicability of battered spouse syndrome. As such a concept, given what the defendant had told her in her evaluation, and that because of what the defendant stated in the above paragraph, it was inapplicable, even if the defendant suffered from battered spouse. So even if she was a battered spouse, in that moment, she didn't have the right to do what she did and failed to do. The defendant, yeah, because she never talked about being in imminent fear at the time. She talked about being angry, and that's what she said. Um, all right, so they give some other law. Wow. Because the defendant was examined by her own expert, Dr. Julie Harper, and was examined by Dr. Warner, both experts were allowed to speak on the applicability of battered spouse syndrome. So that was the part of Owens. So Owens was upset that Dr. Warner said she didn't meet criteria for battered spouse, and or like that in that moment she was angry and she didn't meet the criteria for using justifiable force, but he was okay with Dr. Harper giving that testimony. Because from my recollection, Dr. Harper did say, yes, she was in fear for her life. That's why she did what she did. And this was understandable based on what she had been through. That's how Dr. Harper explained it. And so the relevance of Dr. Warner not listening to the testimony of Dr. Michael Brannon and Dr. Julie Harper is lost upon the state. What? Like, why? What? Ultimately, regardless of what all three doctors in this case testified to, the crux of the entire case was that even accepting the defendant's trial testimony, which was largely inconsistent with her statements to doctors Harper and Warner, she failed to comply with the Florida law and in fact escaped having the forcible felony instruction read because of a statute of limitations technicality, a point which opposing counsel agreed with at the charge conference. Okay, so I guess okay, wow, right. This argument was permissible regardless of whether Dr. Warner testified about it or not. Exactly. As a remedy, the court allowed the defendant to question Dr. Warner about opinions she was not asked by the state to give to the jury, specifically whether the defendant suffered from any disorders recognized in the DSM-5 or met the criteria for battered spouse syndrome. She gave the following answer during her deposition. We've already went through some of this. I've already read through this. Um, and so Owens is just full of yeah. For the above stated reasons, the court should deny the request for a new trial on this ground. Okay, ground 5. Ooh, alleged prosecutorial misconduct by essentially making a second closing argument instead of a rebuttal argument. The defendant, much like her motion to suppress statements, cited no authority to support this ground being improper or grounds for a new trial. This, of course, is no bar to her again alleging prosecutorial misconduct. The proper limit of a rebuttal is a reply to what has been brought out in the defendant's closing argument. The state strategically broke up its closing arguments. The first argument was nearly entirely devoted to why the defendant was guilty of second degree capital M. Obviously, there was some inevitable crossing into why it was not justified and why the defendant lacked credibility, but that was largely left for rebuttal. The defendant's nearly 2-hour closing argument centered on why she met criteria for battered spouse, including pictures. Okay? It touched upon why this made it objectively reasonable for her to fear imminent harm or death if the victim escaped the suitcase, but failed to address the applicability of the law to the facts. And the facts were that she left the victim shut in a suitcase after he said he could not breathe and asked to be let out. And that could make him feel, so that she could make him feel how he made her feel in the past and could say whatever she wanted to him, and he had to listen to her. Because so I remember now, because the forcible felony of not letting him out, like, the state could have charged her with more charges, but she was just charged with what she was charged with. That was the whole statute of limitations thing. It was completely fair rebuttal. Let me just make sure I'm still small. Good. It was completely fair rebuttal to distinguish the difference between the defendant's subjective belief that something is necessary versus objectively reasonable for a cautious and prudent person in her circumstance. Likewise, it was fair to attack her credibility as a witness, as that was the foundation of her defense, and to point out that even if the defendant's arguments were accepted, she failed to comply with the Florida statute. So, conclusion: there is no right to jury nullification. Okay. The defendant was placed on notice several times uh, that her version of events did not amount to justifiable use of force under the law. Multiple times. Like the state kept saying, this this does not this does not meet criteria. This does not meet criteria. No version of the defendant's events amounted to a justifiable use of force due to her only stating she became afraid after she had become angry and aggressed on him. Wow. All right. So this was written by William Robert J. Thank you, Mr. J, for all your work. Good gosh. This is this is some stuff. All right. So now we are going to I'm just going um to mention, because this was very, very emotional testimony. George Torres's mom, Blanca, gave just heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, tearful pleas and cries for justice for her son. And that this is something that has impacted her family. Um, George's sister, Victoria Torres, gave a statement as well. And in Victoria's statement, I really encourage you to go back and listen to the statements if you haven't watched them. But in Victoria's statement, she talked about the trauma that her and her family members have, and that this is a trauma and pain that they have to live with forever. All right. And with Victoria talked about the fact that even something as simple as zipping up a suitcase, that is something like she leaves 2 to 3 inches because of the pain of what happened to her brother. And I I adore the Torres family because um, Victoria mentioned the fact that there has been other trauma in her family, and that Sarah and her other brother. So there's another brother after the incident with Sarah. Okay, so this is where she says it. Okay. All right. So I am gonna play this part. I am gonna play part of Victoria's statement because I think it was powerful.
Torres. George is my brother. Um, Unfortunately, my family has experienced two horrifying tragedies.
So another one of George's brothers, so trigger warning, trigger warning. He um he unalived I think it's his girlfriend, but the mother of some of like so and Owens mentioned this to try to say that like the the Torres men have it, and it was all lies. Like Sarah was the one that did what she did, and this family is holding that brother responsible and accountable for what he did to the mother of his child or children. I'm not sure.
I just want to make it clear that George deserves justice. As far as my other brother and Sarah deserve to rot in jail.
And so this is where I adore this family, because she's saying if you do a crime, you deserve to have consequences. And so her brother's trial hasn't happened. So this is it's not George. It's another brother. Y'all know I'm bad with names. So I forget the name of the other brother. Mr. Owens mentioned it. Um but because Sarah has a brother that I've heard is in prison, and we're not going to go into the details in the comments. It's not YouTube friendly. And so to me, people are responsible for their actions, And I really just this was heartbreaking, and just hearing her talk about how difficult it is to, just do simple things like zip a suitcase. Anna Torres, George's oldest daughter, gave a statement on behalf of her 3 siblings, and, it was very, very powerful, very, very powerful testimony. Um, uh, Diane Smith, the chaplain from the jail, came in and talked about how Sarah is a servant, and that she talks about her serving others. There have been some allegations that Christina Pena, I don't there have been I don't know if it's true. There have been statements. So her and Sarah met in jail, and there are some thoughts that they might be more than friends. I don't know. Um, but she gave a statement talking about Sarah. Um, oh, there was another inmate, former inmate, that gave a statement. And then a true crime enthusiast who met Sarah in the last year, and Sarah offered her kidney, which Sarah, or was it liver? Kidney? Liver? Might have been liver. Kidney? I don't know. Sarah offered her an organ, but okay. Two things can be true at the same time. And that's why I really like to talk about these cases, because just because somebody has narcissistic traits or has narcissistic personality disorder, they are not mean to everyone. They It's not something. There will be people in their life that like them, that they choose to not be that way with. But I'm sure the prison guards, because Sarah she's so entitled and grandiose, and we are going to get to that in her statement in just a moment. Like, she is so just over the top all the time. The amount of words that she says and uses to try to puff herself up and make her seem smarter than what she really is, which just she uses words wrong. Like, or sometimes she takes a simple concept and then adds more words, and it becomes confusing. And we're gonna get to that in her statement. But a lot of people, I'm sure these people have had positive experiences with her. I'm sorry, it's not that I read. Um, Tanika's 2 cents read, it was version 3. It was of Sarah Boone's divorce and custody issues. So Sarah Boone has a child. Please don't put the child's name in the chat. I am so glad that Brian Boone and Brian's son, that they can write off into, they don't have to think about her. Like and if her child decides to have a relationship with her, it should be his choice and not hers. Because in my personal thoughts and my personal opinion, Sarah objectifies people. People are just like okay, this is the person that puts money on my books. This is the person that lets me borrow a pen. This is the person, like, everybody has their place, and they're all doing something for her. And there might be people that she does stuff for too, cuz like I said, a person that has these types of issues, they're not this way with everyone, with everything. And yet, from what I've seen of her, because Brian Boone went to court and said, yes, exactly, that our child is being bullied. I want to move to an area where they don't know, and where we'll have more family support, and I want to move. And Sarah said, no. And Brian's like, he's in counseling, he's really struggling. And Sarah was like, no. And I want you to pay me $1,000 a month in alimony. Ma'am, you were in jail. Why do you need $1,000 a month in alimony? And I do hope that Brian Boone is like, I hope that the courts, because of this crime, that he no longer has to pay alimony, or if he does have to pay something, that it's like $100 a month or something, that it's something real and insignificant. But that's a whole thing. Dr. Harper testified and just talking about battered spouse syndrome. I do want to listen to the state asking her questions about that test.
You may inquire, sir.
In pages 1 and 2 of your report, you go through the sources of your information, correct?
Yes.
And that would include 8 interviews that you had with her from the course of August of 2020 through September of 2024, correct?
There were 9 interviews, but 8 dates of service are listed.
You did the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms Test, or MFAST,
That's right.
Inventory of Legal Knowledge, ILK,
That's right.
Clinician Administered PTSD Scale 5 examination.
Yes.
You consulted with her attorney,
Yes.
videotaped interviews from this court case number of Sarah Boone, interview part 1 and 2, Abraham Moreno interview, Brandon Moats interview, Brian Boone interview, Juan Torres interview, and Melissa Sexton interview, correct?
Yes.
You reviewed the autopsy photos.
Yes.
You reviewed some of the digital forensic exhibits, including the Apple iPhone XS and a Samsung SMJ 327 T1 photographs from those 2 devices.
Yes.
You reviewed Bates stamped discovery pages 1 through 413.
That's correct.
The crime scene photos are photos of a scene taken on June 19th of 2020.
Yes.
Aspire Health records.
Yes.
And who do those pertain to?
Aspire Health records are for Sarah Boone.
Florida Hospital Medical Group records.
Yes.
And who do those records pertain to?
That is also for Sarah Boone.
And Aspire, is that a mental health treatment facility?
It has an emergency department record, but that would be the place where she was detained under the Baker Act.
And it is routine and common in the practice of forensic psychology or psychiatry to rely on the records of other such practitioners.
As a source of information, sure.
You reviewed the deposition of Dr. Tanya Warner.
I did.
You reviewed the trial testimony of Sarah Boone, Brian Boone, Dr. Michael Brannon, Dr. Tanya Werner, correct?
Yes.
The jury verdict form dated 10/25/24.
Yes.
Witness list notice of filing amended
Yes.
on this case. Records of Jorge Torres or George Torres involving case numbers 2019
She's very thorough.
MM
course.
2017 care record ladder. And you reviewed Sarah's writings regarding missing days of work and Baker Act.
Oh yeah, and Sarah, I think she's also written her life story or something, because I think that was one of the things listed. Sarah's written her life.
And a 74-page life story.
That's right.
And then case 2018 CF 10573, public records and photos.
Yes.
And a telephone interview with brother on November 26, 2024.
Yes.
Where has Ms. Boone been housed and living since February of 2020?
At the Orange County Jail.
And does the Orange County Jail provide mental health services to inmates?
Okay, so the reason why the state is getting into this is because the defense is claiming that Sarah needs treatment, but she currently has access to treatment, and she's not using it. So people are surprised it was only 74 pages. I wonder if she ran out of paper, or if she decided to write this part of the story. Like, I'm sure she has more to add, and it's going to be from her perspective only, because people are saying they would love to hear this story. Like, it's going to be from her perspective. It is going to be, Dr. G's video was great. I watched it this morning, and I really like his body language analysis.
It does.
And you already testified you would routinely, as a forensic psychologist, review records kept of a psychological or psychiatric treatment of a patient or a client, correct?
Yes.
In this particular case, have you reviewed any mental health records generated by the Orange County Jail for Ms. Boone?
No, I have not had the opportunity to do that.
So for the last 58 months or so, if she was being seen by the mental health treatment staff at the jail, you have not reviewed those records.
That's correct.
And they are overseen at the jail, in the Orange County Jail, by a psychiatrist. Are you aware or not?
If the person's level of mental health intervention.
Because she's trying to claim that Sarah needs medication. Like, okay. Now, y'all, prepare yourselves. I'm going to try to catch, because she's going to show us exactly what a smear campaign is. So a smear campaign is when the person that's actually causing harm tries to make the victim out to be the villain and like tries to destroy their name and just talk bad about them to anyone that will listen. And that's what, in my opinion, she's about to do. And she's also going to like his family too. And it's just based on what we've seen in this trial, I don't think the family wanted him to be with her. I think the family desperately wanted for him to break free. And she's going to talk about their love. Okay, so a lot of triggers for this. Okay, because she is going to talk about their and if that's her love, hate me. Okay, her Ali Abulaban, all of those people where their love ends with the people that they say they love not being here anymore. Like that's not love. Love should be safe, and she was not a safe person in my opinion. Or I guess like the law, the court, like this is bad. All right. Let's get into it.
And she didn't hear that, but I wanted her to be made aware.
They're going to put it on the record how many letters the judge has received.
Yes, ma'am.
And that you don't actually read those letters into the record, but you did read them.
I have reviewed them. They're in my binder here. How many do I have? Yes. Give me a second. I can tell you. I have. First one is 1 page. Second one is 2 pages. Third one is 1 page. Fourth one is 2 pages. Fifth one is 2 pages. Sixth one is 2 pages. I have a typed letter from Diane Smith, the assistant chaplain. I have another typed letter from a Nicole Ray, a typed letter from a Stephanie L., a typed letter from Philip Paulson, a email from Lana Albert, 2 pages in length, and a 2-page email from a Danielle Parsons.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Judge, I would like to call Sarah Boone.
You may proceed.
If you could take this.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Brian's done.
Ms. Boone, you can be seated. You've been previously sworn.
And I'm glad her son was able
May inquire,
to
sir.
stay out of it. So I did watch Dr. G Explains, and he's done a phenomenal job talking about how controlling and how in control Sarah needs to be. She also glances over at the camera at times, and she's very much aware that there's an audience and that people are going to see this.
For the record, just state your name again.
Sarah Boone.
Now, this is unlike a trial, so you're allowed to speak in a narrative form, as well as I understand you have taken some notes or written a letter that you want to read from, and then you want to speak to the court after that.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and get started?
This is actually an edited version of.
Hold on a second.
Because her and Owens made her edit it. Owens made her cut some stuff out. I'm gonna make myself a little bigger. I'm gonna make her smaller.
I had a lot to say. I've had a lot of time to think about things, and
And
I
that's
didn't really know how to put it on paper. And I didn't know how much I could say or how little I should say. So what I have here is, like I said, an edited version. But I would like to read the more important parts that I feel that everyone should know that wasn't said in my actual trial. And on top of what I have on paper, this is just the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg.
so okay. I cope by laughing. Okay. Like I'm gonna pause her. I'm gonna pause a lot. So
I wanted to read this, and then if I may, I would like to address everyone in my apology on top of my statement.
it is not gonna be an actual apology. Okay. It's not an apology.
You may proceed, ma'am.
Kentu sukuroi is a kind of Japanese ceramic style which means to repair with gold. In this tradition, when a ceramic piece breaks, an artisan will fuse the pieces back together again using liquid gold or gold dust lacquer. So rather than being covered up, the breaks become more obvious and a brilliant new piece of art emerges from the brokenness. It embraces flaws, weakness, and imperfections, and also teaches the essence of resilience. Every crack in a ceramic piece is a part of its history, and each piece becomes more beautiful because it has been broken. This is the wisdom of Kentu Sukuroi. In my wisdom and with all of my repairs,
In my wisdom. In my wisdom? Like, ma'am, why are you up here talking about your wisdom? Why? Why?
then, now, and ongoing, God is, has been, and will always be my artisan. All of my gold is forgiven.
It gives me Lori, because I saw in the comments, I think over on Tanika's channel, it gives Lori Vallow vibes a little. I think when Sarah reads the Bible, she reads it and then interprets it through her lens, which is that she deserves forgiveness. She deserves, and that everybody is against her. This is all an attack. And this is all like, I don't know, like I think she messes with stuff because she's going to use a scripture later. And I'm just like, ugh.
Forgiveness. This has held me together, made me shine brighter, and overcome the damage caused by George Torres, the Torres family, the justice system.
And Dr. G explains, pointed out the order that she lists this, because she starts with George and then his family and then the justice system, that she's ranking it from like who she holds most responsible. And it's like, ma'am, you are on trial for his murder. And she's going to talk about like her Scarlet M, because she did not want to be seen as a murderer. She did not want to be convicted of murder. And that's where she should have taken the plea deal for manslaughter. I think the plea deal was for manslaughter. And the state is going to talk about the plea deal and all she had to do was accept her responsibility. And like I think it was 15 years. And okay.
Orange County Corrections Department, social media, scoundrel detectives, infamy, defamation, ongoing constitutional rights violations, second-degree murder, forced into being pro se. Just as gold is very precious, forgiveness is invaluable.
I don't like how she talks about forgiveness. I just don't. And I think when I paused it, I think it
And imperfections.
I'm gonna have to find where I was. When she talks about forgiveness, ugh, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. The comment talks about laughing to cope, and laughing to keep from crying is a real thing. And I let myself feel, But then there are times where it's just like, this is so out there that all you can do is just kind of like this is so ugh. And when you see, because the camera is going to pan over to George's family, and during some of the people that were speaking on Sarah's behalf, they end up panning over to the family, and his mom just has her face in her hands. Thank you, Emily, for being a member for 5 months. This case is just ugh. According to lawyer, okay, yeah, some of George's family walked out of court when she bashed George. Yeah, I don't blame them. I don't because it gets really bad. So when I talk about smear, like she is going to accuse him of essay, of stealing from her. Like she's going to accuse him of a lot in this.
Forced into being pro se. Just as gold is very precious, forgiveness is invaluable. Forgiveness is not an attempt to change or forget who, what, or how you've lived through to be so gold, but an act.
So that's where she's talking about forgiveness. She's using her forgiveness to like get through what she's been through. Like the way that she's explaining this is, but once again, she's the center of her world and her life, and this is all just so bad for her.
Act of grace, humility, and considerable self-compassion to be set free from sorrow. Withholding forgiveness denies your brilliance and adds even greater grief and
And it's almost like she's telling the family to forgive her. And it's no, no, no. Like whatever they choose to do. And I think George's mom did say, because sometimes holding on to bitterness and anger and hatred can destroy the person. And so that's each individual person's walk. But you are going to drag George's name through the mud. She doesn't get to ask for their forgiveness, in my opinion. My thoughts.
deeper heartache, irreparable cracks on top of the already that no one deserves, no matter the pain or disappointment, untruths or injustice. It doesn't matter. As the more broken you are, even though now different than before, you've become more outstanding and more extraordinary. Above all,
So this has made her more extraordinary.
when you let go of blame, misunderstandings, excuses, give up your anger and cease from resentment. This
Has she given up her excuses? Like, has she done this? Because this seems like something she's asking other people to do. Like, this doesn't sound like something she's going, what?
is forgiven. And when you forgive, you have, and when you forgive, you heal. And when you heal, you move forward. My goal begins with George Torres, and every time, choke, lie, cry, I forget to work or my son's field trip the next day. For ruining my deceased family's heirlooms, traditions, and keepsakes, my son's furniture, destroying the television we watched together.
I do not believe for a moment that she did not tell him to hit that TV. When she was sitting back recording it, like she would have called the cops on him, I think, if he had destroyed her TV without her permission. That video to me, because in that video, he looks at her and he says, "You're gonna help me clean this up, right?" Like to me, it looks like she told him, like, haha, like, wouldn't it be funny? Like the TV's already, I don't know. To me, it seemed like she told him to do it.
For wrecking our townhome by breaking windows, punching holes in the walls and doors, ramming his entire body into glass doors, kicking in my front and back door over and over and over.
Is that when you locked him out and you had his papers and you like were refusing to give him his birth certificate? Like she leaves out important information.
For breaking or removing the locks from all of the doors and sometimes the knobs altogether, so I had nowhere to feel safe.
And this is once again centering her, when to me, I think he had nowhere in that home to feel safe. He was the one, in my opinion, and in the videos I saw, that was cowering in fear, not her.
Including the sacred space of my son's room where he beat me bloody on his bed. For terrorizing and threatening my blind and deaf dogs by leaving the
Back to the dogs. Oh,
gate open I built to keep them safe, telling me he hoped I'd find their bloated dead body in the
I can
throwing,
believe that.
unrecognizable to my son by breaking all of the bones in my face, like his brother, like all of the times their father beat their mother, wandering into their apartments during hunting expeditions after I had escaped, for drowning me in liquor and wine because I didn't.
For drowning me. I missed this the first time. I missed this the first time, y'all. I missed this the first time. She's blaming him for her drinking. He forced her. Like, what? Oh, oh, you say just a tad. Um, I don't for a minute believe half of what she's saying. I don't for a minute believe half. I don't. That's why I'm skipping through some of this. The worst parts of this, I'm skipping through.
Want to drink, causing me to urinate on myself, then butting the end of the
So that's where, ma'am, you peed on yourself. He did not force you to pee on yourself. Like, that would, like, she doesn't accept responsibility for anything. And that's the whole point of this. Like, this is gaslighting. This is a smear campaign. This is Darvo deny. Oh my gosh. Like, she's trying to make herself the victim in this. And it's just not. She's not.
bottle in my face, giving me 2 black eyes and a bloody nose, for making me experience what it is to be sought and set my car on fire because I got a job, for holding me hostage
When did you work? How long? What? I don't, oh, I don't for a second believe that.
on weekends. My son was supposed to come over by keeping my keys around his neck, my phone in his crotch, and a butcher knife stuck in the middle of the table as a warning not to ask anything or try
This is her fantasy. Like, this is not the way things happened. I don't think this is the way things happened.
to leave, for stabbing me in the leg and not letting me call 911 for an ambulance or seek help, where I nearly bled to death until I concocted a lie to save him from being arrested, for destroying
Despite you, like, getting him arrested multiple times. Okay. Okay.
my phone with a hammer because my son called, for me experiencing ever being arrested and after today, prison, for beating me almost blind, crushing my
No, she's blaming him for why we're all here?
wounds, where a character has a tall lump on their head. I had that too, and many times, for dragging me downstairs by my hair in the middle of the night just to sit next to him, for taking my car, driving drunk with my debit card to buy more alcohol while I slept, even after
Wait a minute. Were you drunk too? I don't for a minute believe that were you sleeping because you were intoxicated as well?
taking my car, driving drunk with my debit card to buy more alcohol while I slept, even after I kindly explained the importance of my car to take my son to school foremost, me to work, and he to his batterers intervention classes and probation officer meetings, where I would be forced to sit for hours in the parking lot waiting for him.
And when she talks about her son, it's to make herself into this amazing mother when she was not consistent. Like, I think Brian Boone came off very credible. And before all of this, he was going to look at, it's my understanding, he was going to look at reducing her time, because the reason why Brian was calling you that morning was because oh my gosh, there we go. The reason he was calling you that morning was because you sometimes did not pick up your son from school. Like, that's why Brian was calling you that day. Brian had to tell you multiple times to call the police. She's just,
For causing me so much trauma and pain, mentally, physically, emotionally, I had to be hospitalized more than once.
I think she was hospitalized for her drinking.
For destroying my reputation and integrity, for my M for murderer scarlet letter,
So, like, you're blaming him for that though. But like, that's what you did. because you didn't unzip a suitcase. Like that's what you did.
Not letting me feel safe to live, talk to other people, spend time with my son, have a job, friendships, simply go to the bathroom with the door closed.
He didn't keep her from those things. Those were the consequences of her actions, in my opinion. I keep adding that part just for like legal purposes.
Or go to sleep soundly or comfortably. I forgive George for lying, for him trying in so many ways, so many times, to end me with his terrifying love. I also forgive the Torres family.
Your love is the thing that's terrifying to me. Like George, he just seemed like he cared. Like all the videos I saw, like he just seemed like I think he truly loved her. And I think he was just an object to her. Because she's going to talk about crying herself to sleep when she was incarcerated.
His mother and father foremost, also his 2 ex-wives and daughters, all for knowing who George was capable of and has done in the past. His history.
I think they all said that he was never, there was no history of DV in any past relationships. Now, I think he was I think he had not been unfaithful with some of the exes, but like that was nothing like this.
Of violence and where he learned it, than to keep turning a blind eye when I would ask for help. All of his siblings, including Pharrell Torres, who is now on his way to prison for stabbing
Pharrell, that's the other brother's name.
The mother of their baby in the side of her head. For everyone who knew what George was doing to me, sometimes how and when, but allowed and enabled. I forgive
you. Who enables you? Like and that's not what this statement is supposed to
them
be.
For caring too late. I hope they all ask themselves while quiet and comfortable in bed at night the uneasy question, what could I have done to stop this from happening to both of them? And after all the time Sarah tried to, by asking for help from all of us and so many times. Another great contributor of my gold is social media, with its greed, insensitivity, deception, obvious exploitation, and advantageous gain from my criminal case as a whole, and for sentencing me by anticipation as a result of ignorance and hate, conjured and fabricated by the organized crime that is social media, which condemned me in the
organized crime? Ma'am, so I was open, like, because after her case, before the prosecution's rebuttal, I don't know if I told y'all, like, I was so nervous that she was gonna get away with this. And then the prosecution, like, so I play spades, and when you have the big joker, you like slam it down, like, bam! Like, sometimes you like stick it to the top of your head, and then like the prosecution came in with like the biggest, just like they trump card, like they won the game. Like, and this is not a game. Okay, this is about justice. This was about justice for George. But Sarah,
the court of global public opinion since the beginning. My family law case is the new prey waiting to be picked apart and pillaged from me being made infamous by social media in my criminal case. It simply seems I cannot forgive and be forgiven and move forward. Social media has made me a pariah. It has caused great oppression and undeniable disadvantages, especially by broadcasting and manipulating my cases online. In my criminal case, as a result, my opportunities to be given a fair, proper, and uninfluenced successful conclusion was heavily depleted and poisoned. I forgive them. Also, all of the media tycoons for not having a life of their own, trying so desperately to make themselves seem so right by making me appear so wrong. Forgiveness for prejudgment, ridiculous theatrics, lies, making and taking blood money from my and others' misfortunes.
we are the ones with the theatrics.
Accidents, and catastrophes. It's all over their hands and their keyboards. And even after all that's been said and done, theorized, hypothesized, scrutinized, and blasphemed in my case, still no one knows me. In the end, I forgive myself for not choosing my life sooner, for not being more brave, vigilant, bolder.
She forgives herself. Now, self-forgiveness is a thing. When you're on trial, like when you're about to be sentenced for second-degree murder, I don't think it's appropriate to talk about self-forgiveness.
And outspoken, stronger, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. For being hopeless,
All of this shows that she continues to be a risk to the community. She has not learned from what's happened, and, because the reason why I think the judge gave the sentence that he gave is she hasn't changed, and, like, this could happen again.
desperate, simple minded, weak, and inexperienced. I forgive myself for not realizing I was enduring a life of domestic violence and that the vicious cycle of never ends. I had nothing to compare to. I've never been hit by a man ever before in my life. I was raised hitting a woman was wrong and should never happen. No excuse. I forgive myself for not escaping permanent.
What about you hitting him? So that's where I teach my son, yes, like, don't initiate but, like, I also teach my son nobody has a right to put their hands on him. Nobody has a right to demean, degrade, to take my child's documents. Like, that's where I'm coming from.
For not fighting back sooner to save myself, my son, my dogs, home, and car. Having 2020 hindsight, thinking of everything I could have done differently or better to avoid the outcome. I think about this every day since.
Hmm.
Also, of all the good days we had together, for him at least,
Good
while I
days.
was constantly in hyperdrive, high alert, and paranoid, making sure I did everything right all the time. If not, the great possibility I would be ended as George threatened me with so many times before.
I don't believe he ever threatened to end her. There are text messages of her saying, "I'll get rid of him." Like, there are messages of her saying things.
I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster, and no matter how grotesque he may
So
become, I still loved him, hoped, and forgave. I tried breaking the spell so he wouldn't be a monster anymore. I saw who he was inside. George made me then, now, and always love him for all of his cracks also. We made each other our own brilliant pieces of art from the cracks and repairs. Unfortunately, not all cracks can be. In all of my forgiveness, George is my greatest lesson and will forever be a part of me.
yeah,
I think of him every day and still speak to him when alone on the rec yard. I ask his forgiveness and that he looks for me.
I missed that part the first time I listened to it too. Ugh. That reminds me of, like, the Lori Vallow "They Visit Me" stuff. No. He's with his family. No. No. You don't ugh. Ugh.
Me at the gates of heaven so I can tell him how sorry I am endlessly and that I never stopped loving him in all of it and still. When I first came to jail, I put my mat under my bed and cried all day and all night for months,
Made it
only falling asleep
herself.
from being so exhausted with grief. I wrote him letters. I wrote his family and his daughters apologizing for asking for their forgiveness.
I don't believe
But
it.
due to fear that my life or sons would be jeopardized, I did not send.
Again.
I am sorry. I cannot begin to fathom any of their grief and sadness.
'Cause
Please forgive me.
you lack empathy.
Almost everything reminds me of him, seeing my stab wound especially every day especially. It truly reminds me that all I really did live through. George haunts me. He is everywhere. I believe because I do still love him, think of him, and miss his laugh the most. In my heart, I know he is with me and understands that this tragedy was not intentional. I hope everyone can, his family foremost. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please wholeheartedly know that, and always, I would never. Forgive me, George. Forgive me, Torres family.
No.
Forgive me, Judge Cranick.
No.
To the entire planet, please forgive me. I graciously and humbly ask for consideration for forgiveness to be extended.
So, I don't hate Sarah. Does that make sense? Like, and she doesn't need my forgiveness. Like this is I was like, no, like this isn't something I don't have strong feelings about her. I don't think about her. I'm so glad that this will hopefully be my last video on her. Like, no, like I think she thinks she's the center of all of our worlds, and no, no. So the reason why I say so hate gives power, okay? So that's why I disconnect from that personally. So this is my own thing. You don't have to do this, okay? But I the j- I have and this wasn't like this is I'm able to have some distance from this. Holding on, hate is the opposite of love, and it takes a lot of emotion. I'm indifferent about Sarah. Like, it's like, all right, this is it. This is my last video on Sarah. And like I'm done. I'm done. And we're gonna move on to the next case.
in it instead of judgment, for reconciliation and restoration for
She's about to get some judgment.
all of us to move forward. My apology is profuse and ceaseless. Allow me, please, to brush off the muck, wipe the blood off of my face, and fix the cuts in my skin. I ask for understanding in what really happened and for how long. For second chances, repentance, and redemption to advocate for all domestic violence survivors,
Yeah.
to help them overcome, heal, and still hope, always, to make their voices heard, to confidently walk with all of their scars on the outside and the inside, to help them not ever become a casualty of domestic violence as so many others,
George.
to stop the abuse and maltreatment before it's too late. There is always hope, and you can survive. In my soft-spoken conclusion, I ask this: would I be the darling mother, celebrated woman of the year, if it were I who died?
But she wasn't a darling mother. She wasn't like, so God forbid something had happened to her. Like, and it had been like if the roles had been reversed, he probably would have been charged with first degree. Like like it would have been worse for him, I think, if if she had died by his hands. And he wasn't the one that was being aggressive, I don't think. After seeing everything, he just he just wasn't. He just wasn't. Oh yeah, and she was not very soft spoken.
How many daughters, mothers, sisters, aunts, grandmothers, nieces, and friends have been because they did? I am a survivor. Learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke oppressors, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. Isaiah 117, all encompassing, protect the abused.
Yes, we are going to protect George's memory. That's what we're about to protect.
Ms. Boone, is that the end of your written statement?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, gathering your thoughts, did you want to make an oral statement?
I do.
All
The
right, would
second
you do
statement
that
was
now?
better than her written.
Yes, please. My statement, my verbal statement, is primarily to the Torres family, to the judge, to his daughters. I know you all know who I really am, and that I did care for George, and that I do still love George.
Yeah.
I know you know that we had very many good days.
Good days. She
And
did.
I take offense to the statement of being said that this is just for a moment. Right now, with me
Nobody cares what offends you. Oh,
here in the courtroom in front of you all, this is just for a moment. But the moments before that, in order for me to be here, is endless. It's everlasting. The scars that I have on the inside, my outside scars have healed, except for my stab wound. But this has changed me as a person to see things differently and to understand things differently and to...
how has it changed you as a person? Like, that would have been more helpful to talk about, like, how this has changed her as a person, because I don't know if it has. Like, that's what she's saying. I don't know that she's changed.
not be weak and just try to protect yourself, and forever, regardless of the time that I may receive from today,
Okay.
I forever will have this experience. I forever will have George Torres with me in my heart, in my mind,
Yeah.
my body, and my soul.
Yeah.
As he and I used to say that we were one soul split into two bodies.
And that can be like, ugh, ugh, one, ugh. But what I mean by that is we talk about codependence here. And I think she felt incomplete without him, but it was because of her torment of him, in my opinion.
This is not just for a moment. It may be for everyone in this courtroom, but when I leave, this is forever. When you all leave, that this is forever. This is forever for everyone here and those who it matters to most. I am one of those who will experience this forever.
Yeah, you will.
I'm sorry. Words do not define my shame.
And I think she thought of what word does she need? Because I didn't think she was going to say shame there. Words do not define my shame. Because she doesn't seem ashamed of anything.
And I don't know what else it is that I can say and convey to the Torres family
Let's go ahead and finish it up.
how this happened. The ifs and whys and how really don't matter. It happened, and I'm sorry.
Are you really?
Words cannot describe. And I hope that everyone can forgive me,
No.
the Torres family most of all, and his daughters, because I know what he meant to them. And I don't think that anybody ever understood what he meant to me and I to him. And I ask
She even had to end with like what she meant to him. Ew.
for forgiveness.
All right. So that's the gist of that. Now let's get to Judge K. It's going to be quick and sweet.
The court has had the opportunity to review the evidence and testimony that was presented at trial. The victim impact statements presented here today, the statements of character witnesses, both orally and in writing, Dr. Harper's report and testimony, the defendant's testimony, pre-sentencing investigation, the arguments of the state and the arguments of the defense. Court pronounces sentence as follows. Ms. Boone, court sentences you to life in the Department of Corrections with credit time served that Madam Clerk will provide to you momentarily. There are also court costs and costs of prosecution, which Madam Clerk will give you the totals of momentarily. Due to the court levying a life sentence, the court is inclined to liquidate those to a civil judgment unless I hear opposition from the.
All right. So that was that. Sarah Boone was sentenced to life in prison. And in Florida, life means life. And so that is that. I am glad that I was able to go over this with you all. I don't have time to go over the Ashley Benefield thing. I'm going to take a look at it. And if there's something that I want to say about it, stay tuned because I might cover that sentencing about 6 p.m. tonight. So keep an eye out for that. Let me know if y'all have any questions. I appreciate you all. Have a good one. Bye.